As a reminder, all participant lines will be in the listen-only mode. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I now hand the conference over to Mr. Subir Sen, Head of Investor Relations of Hindalco. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Sen.
Thank you, and a very good evening or morning, everyone. I hope you all are safe. On behalf of Hindalco Industries, I welcome you all to the earnings call for the first quarter of the financial year FY22. In this call, we will refer to the Q1 FY22 investor presentation available on company's website. Some of the information on this call may be forward-looking in nature and is covered by the safe harbor language on slide number 2 of the said presentation. In this presentation, we have covered the key highlights of all the businesses for the first quarter of financial year 22 and a segment-wise comparative financial analysis of India business and our overseas subsidiary, Novelis. Please note, in this quarter, unallocable corporate AS&G expenses, which used to be apportioned to our individual business segments on certain basis, so far is now clubbed under unallocable expense or income in order to truly reflect in the individual business segment EBITDA in India operations. The corresponding segment information for the prior periods will also be restated accordingly for a comparative analysis. We have with us from Hindalco's management, Mr. Satish Pai, Managing Director, Mr. Praveen Maheshwari, Chief Financial Officer. From Novelis' management, we have Mr. Steve Fisher, President and CEO, Mr. Dev Ahuja, Chief Financial Officer. Following this presentation, the call will be open to any questions you may have. An audio replay of this call will also be available on our website. Now let me turn this call to Satish.
Thank you, Subir. A very good afternoon and morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's conference call for Hindalco Q1 earnings. I hope you and your families are safe and vaccinated as we continue to manage through this challenging pandemic situation. Let me start with a short update on COVID-19 and our preparations. Hindalco's management is fully prepared to tackle a third wave of COVID by fortifying its efforts to protect employees and the community. Hindalco has already vaccinated 93% of its employees and families with at least one dose, including third-party partners. In some states, the government is collaborating with Hindalco to vaccinate the local population at the company's own hospitals and health centers. Hindalco's dedicated team of 77 doctors, 245 paramedics is working round the clock to serve its employees and the community. Hindalco has boosted medical infrastructure and equipment in its own hospitals and health centers with critical care equipment such as CT scan machines, set up oxygen lines in remote locations to serve patients needing ICU care, and enhanced its lab testing facilities. Hindalco has also strengthened its medical teams, including adding pediatricians and upskilling its paramedics. Let me now take you through Hindalco's progress across various sustainability metrics in Q1 FY22 on slide 5 and 6. On the environment, there is a strong focus on water, waste, air emissions and biodiversity. Freshwater consumption was at 18.4 million cubic meters in Q1 of FY22, with a continuous reduction in the consumption of water at all locations over the years. Hindalco is adding one site each year to the zero liquid discharge to achieve water positivity at mines and downstream units. This is being done along with the development of healthy watersheds and rainwater harvesting and moving towards its target of all sites zero water discharge by 2025. We are committed to 100% waste recycling in terms of all wastes that are hazardous, non-hazardous and bulk waste such as fly ash and bauxite residue. We have achieved 82.7% recycling and reuse of waste in Q1 FY22. We have been consistently achieving 100% bauxite residue utilization at 3 out of the 4 alumina refineries. Utkal Alumina Refinery is currently running several research projects to reuse bauxite residue for mine backfilling and road construction. We are committed to reducing landfill usage by 5% every year while moving towards our target of zero landfill by 2030. On green cover and biodiversity, the company continues to do well to increase green cover with the scientific biodiversity management plan. Our Green Belt Enhancement Plan developed for 10 non-biodiversity management plan sites based on revised Forest Department SOPs for flora and fauna conservation. Our Aditya Smelter cum Power Plant has implemented its first Miyawaki patch, a 3-tier scientific afforestation in a 400-meter square area with the laid down SOPs under Biodiversity Management Plan by the IUCN. Our cumulative green belt at all our sites is now spread over 4,684 acres. On slide 6, the renewable energy and safety update. We have assessed the total potential on-site solar projects across all our units to be around 246 megawatts. We are committed to attain our target of 100 megawatt capacity by the end of March 2022. Of this 100 megawatts planned for FY22, 49 megawatts have been implemented and the balance 52 megawatts are now currently under implementation and expected to come up by FY22 end. We have so far identified and are in the process of finalizing 32 megawatt solar projects to be executed in FY23. We are also in discussion with developers of renewable hybrids with pumped hydro storage for 100 to 150 megawatt power for our Aditya unit. The exploration and evaluation of emerging technologies in the space of energy storage, carbon capture and utilization, and hydrogen to be used as a fuel is also being done. This is expected to improve with technology maturity and time. Currently, the cost is high and utilization areas are hazy. We are planning pilot projects in FY23. The specific energy consumption in aluminium was recorded at 84.6 at the end of Q1 FY22 from the base year of FY15. The LTIFR was recorded at 0.35 in this quarter. There was one fatality recorded in Q1 FY22 of a contract workman in our Indian operation. We are committed to zero harm and have been continuously upgrading our safety programs and systems to meet international standards and provide the safest atmosphere for our employees and contract workmen across our region. Coming to slide 8 on the key highlights of our performance in Q1 FY22. Hindalco delivered its best ever financial performance in Q1 across all businesses backed by improved macros, better operational efficiencies, improved product mix and strong market recovery. Novelis recorded quarterly shipments of 973 KT up 26% year on year and an all-time high EBITDA of 555 million up 119% year on year on the back of higher volumes, favorable product mix, favorable metal benefits and a 47 million gain related to a favorable decision in a Brazilian tax litigation. EBITDA per ton also stood at $570 a ton, up 75% year on year, and is $522 per ton, excluding the gain related to the Brazilian tax litigation. Net income from continued operation was at 303 million in this quarter versus a loss of 61 million in the corresponding period last year. Novelis launched an offering of 2 unsecured senior notes of 750 million each at a coupon of 3.25 and 3.875% due in 2026 and 2031 respectively. Novelis also received credit rating upgrades by S&P Global Ratings to BB from BB- on 22nd July 2021. Moving on to Hindalco's India aluminium business performance in Q1. Quarterly business EBITDA for Hindalco India Aluminium was at a record high of 2,352 crores, up 142% year on year. The EBITDA margin was at a high of 37.5%. This quarterly margin was the highest in the last 13 years of the company and continues to be the best in the industry. Metal sales were flat year-on-year at 303 KT on account of a delayed shipment of around 10 KT. Value-added product sales were up at 82 KT, up 137% year-on-year, supported by a continued revival of the domestic market. Our 500 KT Utkal expansion project's commercial production is beginning in Q2 of the current financial year. Turning to the quarterly performance of the copper business on slide number 9. Copper Smelter 3 ramped up well post the maintenance shutdown during this quarter. Cathode production was at 63 KT, up 52% year-on-year, while CC rod production was at 44 KT, up 67% year-on-year. Metal sales was at 80 KT, up 36%, while CC rod sales were at 46%, up 50% year-on-year in line with market recovery. Copper EBITDA was recorded at 261 crores in Q1 FY22. Coming to the quarterly consolidated performance, the EBITDA was at a record 6,790 crores, up 188% year-on-year. Quarterly consolidated PAT for continued operation was at 3,254 crores versus a loss of 569 crore in the corresponding period of last year. Hindalco continues to maintain its strong treasury balance of around $872 million in Novelis and 9,425 crores in India at the end of June 2021. The consolidated gross debt was down by about 16,345 crores, while net debt was lower by 10,389 crores from the peak on 30th June 2020, resulting in a significant improvement in the net debt to EBITDA to 2.36 times at the end of June 21. I am happy to share the recent credit rating upgrades for Hindalco. In July 21, CRISIL upgraded Hindalco's credit rating by one notch to AA+ with stable outlooks for bonds. CARE Ratings also affirmed the AA+ credit rating with an outlook upgrade from negative to stable for long-term loans and bonds of Hindalco. Turning to the broader economic environment on slide 11. As per IMF's latest estimates, global economy is expected to expand by 6% in calendar year 21 after contracting by 3.2% in calendar year 20, largely supported by post-recession rebound in major economies. The deepening divide between advanced and emerging economy growth performance is led by differences in the pace of the vaccine rollout and the extent of fiscal policy support provided by the government. Close to 40% of the population in advanced economies has been fully vaccinated, compared with 11% in the emerging market economies, and an even smaller fraction in low-income developing countries. Growth in advanced economies is firming up, led by large-scale fiscal support and the easing of pandemic restrictions, primarily in the US and to some extent Europe. Recovery in emerging economies is also supported by pent-up demand and rising commodity prices to some extent. On the domestic front, the momentum in economic recovery in the H2 of FY21 was interrupted by the second wave. However, recent uptick in indicators like PMI, exports, GST suggest that economic activity is showing signs of recovery in Q2 of FY22. The easing of supply side pressures, gradual rise in pent-up demand, and expected acceleration in the pace of vaccination should see improvement in economic activities. Downside risks in the form of third wave, limited direct fiscal support, and rising inflation continue to remain a challenge. We believe that the government's targeted fiscal support and the RBI's accommodative monetary policy shall support economic recovery. The market estimates GDP in the range of 8.5 to 10.5 for FY22. Now let me take you through the aluminium industry overview in slides 12 and 13. The global production in H1 CY21 grew by 6% year-on-year to 34 million tons, led by a 9% increase in production in China and a 3% growth in the rest of the world. Global consumption in CY21 also rebounded sharply by 14% year-on-year to 34 million tons due to the low base effect. In H1 CY21, the Chinese consumption grew by 12% year-on-year, while the rest of the world grew by 18%. With both production and consumption at 34 million tons, the markets were balanced as the Chinese deficit of 0.3 million tons was offset by a surplus of 0.2 million tons in the rest of the world. However, in Q2 CY21, the overall world consumption saw a growth of 12% year-on-year due to the base effect, reaching 17.5 million tons, while production expanded by 7% year-on-year to 16.9 million tons. Hence, in Q2 calendar year 21, the markets were in a deficit of 0.6 million tons. In the world, excluding China, consumption grew sharply by 33% year-on-year to 6.9 million tons, primarily due to the base effect. The production grew by 4% year-on-year to 7.2 million tons, leading to a marginal surplus of 0.3 million tons. In China, consumption grew by 1% year-on-year to 10.6 million tons. Demand for ICE vehicles in the auto sector has softened due to the shortage of semiconductors and the withdrawal of some of the subsidies offered by local governments. However, the Chinese government's encouragement for EV and renewables, especially solar, is expected to boost Chinese consumption. The production increased by 9% year-on-year at 9.7 million tons, with a consumption of 10.6 million tons in Q2 calendar year 21. The Chinese markets were actually in a deficit of 0.9 million tons. With the markets balanced and improvement in global consumption, aluminium prices continued to grow by 14% year-on-year to 2,399 per ton in Q2 calendar year 21, from an average of 2,096 per ton in Q1 of calendar year 21. On a quarter-to-date basis, the Q3 CY21 global aluminium prices continue to rise and have reached $2,487 per ton. Coming to slide 12, in Q1 FY22, the domestic demand is estimated at 884 KT, a 54% growth year-on-year on account of the low base effect. However, if you compare Q1 FY22 sequentially, the consumption dropped 18% year-on-year due to the COVID second wave. Lower automotive production has led to a 10% drop in the import of scrap compared to Q4 of FY21. Furthermore, with lockdowns and phased unlocking in the country, trade markets were also soft during the quarter. Consequently, electrical, building and construction, consumer durables, industrial machinery were also affected in this quarter. However, the bright spot in this quarter was a strong demand in food and pharma packaging. Hence, sequentially, the sales of domestic primary producers was lower by 19% year-on-year at 173 KT. Due to weak demand sentiment, imports excluding scrap also sharply degrew by 27% year-on-year in this quarter. Going forward, with declining COVID cases, the economic sentiments are likely to revive. Moving to slide 14, the global FRP demand is expected to grow by 9% in calendar year 21 versus a contraction of around 4% in calendar year 20 on account of recovery in demand and base effect. You must have gone through the details of the segment-wise end market outlook in the Novelis presentation. I will just quickly refresh some specific end market outlook for calendar year 21. The overall market demand for beverage can sheet is estimated to grow by approximately 3 to 6% in calendar year 21, as beverage can continues to show its resiliency with increased demand for sustainable aluminum cans across all regions. Due to the highest demand in this segment, significant can making expansions have been announced in the next 2 to 3 years. The automotive segment is estimated to grow between 20 to 25% in calendar year 21 due to the base effect and continued revival of demand. The semiconductor shortage is expected to have a short-term impact on OEM production and demand. The overall demand in the aerospace sheet is expected to grow in the range of 5 to 10% in calendar year 21 as air travel starts to normalize. As vaccine rollouts are a positive step towards increasing consumer air travel, demand for premium aerospace sheet from OEMs is expected to remain at similar levels as fiscal 2021 with an uneven recovery to follow. India FRP demand will grow year on year due to the low base effect, while it is expected to decline sequentially due to the impact of lockdowns in the country in Q1 FY22. Demand is strong in pharma and food packaging industry, whereas other segments including consumer durables, automotive, B&C sector faced headwinds this period. Domestic demand of FRP is estimated to recover in Q2 FY22 in a phased manner with unlocking in the country. Turning to the copper industry globally on slide 15, in H1 CY21, global consumption of copper increased by 9% year-on-year due to the base effect. China production and consumption both grew by 9% year-on-year. World ex-China production grew by 2.5% while consumption grew by 9% year-on-year. The economic rebound with the push in demand for EVs and green energy has also boosted the global prices of copper to a lifetime high of $10,700 a ton in May 21. In Q2 calendar year 21, global production of copper grew by 6%, whereas the consumption increased by 5% year-on-year to 6.1 million tons as compared to the corresponding period last year. This was mainly on account of recovery in the world ex-China, where consumption grew at a faster pace by around 22% year-on-year. Chinese demand degrew by 6% during the same period on account of lower physical demand for copper in China due to the steep rise in global prices of copper. On concentrate supply side, there were major disruptions at the mines in Chile and Peru, which contributes about 40% of global production of copper. The COVID situation as well as the community unrest in Peru has caused several mine disruptions in the first few months of the year. The spot TCRC was very tight during Q2 calendar year 21, reaching a level of 9 to 10 cents per pound. However, Chinese smelters advancing their maintenance shutdown plans and replacing the concentrate with blister has led to an improvement in the spot TCRC to reach 14 to 15 cents a pound level during July of 21. The TCRC is expected to improve further from these levels in the second half of calendar year 21 as some new copper mines are being commissioned in the South American region. Coming to slide 16 on the domestic side, the overall domestic market grew by 30% year-on-year at 118 KT versus 91 KT in the corresponding period of last year. On a sequential basis, the domestic refined copper demand degrew by 27% at 118 KT compared to 161 KT in Q4 due to lower demand on account of COVID-related lockdowns in the country. This demand is expected to improve steadily to a normalized level in the next few quarters due to the declining COVID cases and the phased unlocking in the country. Praveen will now take you through the performance highlights of each of the business segments.
Thanks, Satish. In this part of the presentation, I shall take you through the operational and financial performance of each of our businesses. Starting with Novelis on slide 19. Novelis clocked a record quarterly financial and operational performance. Novelis recorded shipment of 973 KT, up 26% YOY compared to the corresponding quarter of the last year. On the shipment mix in quarter one, cans were about 58%, auto was about 17% of the total volume, specialties were 23%, and aero was about 2%. We are doing equally well on the various ongoing expansion projects. Automotive finishing lines in Guthrie, US and Changzhou, China were commissioned last year and now are ramping up in line with expectations along with customers' qualifications. The recycling, casting and rolling expansions in Brazil are on track and are likely to commission in the current quarter. Our expansion project in Zhenjiang, China, which is a part of our overall Asia growth strategy, is expected to begin in the current year. This will entail an investment of about $375 million and is expected to take about 3 years to complete. This project will include a new cold mill, automotive casting house, recycling capabilities and hot mill upgrade in China. On slide 20, you can see the comparative financial performance trend of Novelis, reflecting its record quarterly performance in terms of revenue, EBITDA and net profit. This is on the back of higher volumes, product mix, favorable metal benefits, and a $47 million gain related to a favorable decision in a Brazilian tax litigation. Excluding this one-off gain, the EBITDA was $522 per ton in this quarter. Slide 22 shows the details of the performance of the Indian aluminum business segment. The aluminum metal production was 319 KT, up 9% YOY and 1% sequentially. The production of downstream products was also higher by 150% YOY at 86 KT in this quarter. Alumina production stood at 718 KT in quarter 1, up 15% YOY and 3% sequentially, with the ramping up of Utkal post the maintenance shutdown in the previous quarter. On the market front, the domestic market was rather soft due to the second wave of the pandemic, although it shows a huge growth compared to the corresponding quarter of the last year, which was even more impacted by the first wave in the lockdowns. The share of domestic sales in this quarter was 44%. VAP sales were at 82 KT, which was 27% of the total metal sales in quarter 1. Moving on to the financial performance of the Indian aluminum business on slide 23. This segment posted a revenue of 6,267 crores in this quarter, reflecting a growth of 41% YOY on account of higher global aluminum prices. Aluminum EBITDA was at a record high of 2,352 crores, up 142% YOY on account of favorable macros, better efficiencies, improved product mix, and a strong market recovery. The EBITDA margins in this quarter were highest in the last 13 years at 37.5%. Moving to slide 25, the overall copper cathode production was at 53 KT in this quarter, up 52% YOY. Relative to the capacity, cathode production was low due to maintenance shutdown in smelter 3 during the quarter. This smelter has now successfully ramped up and is performing well. On a comparative basis, production of PC rods was higher by 67% year-on-year at 44 KT, while sales stood at 46 KT, higher by 50% YOY with the corresponding period of last year. Sequentially, overall metal and PC rod sales were low due to lower production and softening of the domestic market in this quarter. The financial performance of the copper segment is on slide 26. Revenues were up 134% YOY at 7,094 crores because of higher global prices of copper. EBITDA was at 261 crores in this quarter compared to 66 crores in quarter 1 of FY21. Let's turn to consolidated financial numbers for quarter 1 on slide 28. Hindalco reported an outstanding consolidated financial performance in this quarter with revenues of 41,358 crores, EBITDA of 6,790 crores, and PAT from continuing operations at 3,254 crores. The detailed quarterly comparative financial numbers are attached as an annexure to this presentation on slide 34. The Indian businesses of Hindalco also reported a remarkable performance in this quarter with revenues of 13,349 crores, EBITDA of 2,713 crores, and profit after tax at 1,037 crores. These details are also provided as an annexure to this presentation on slide 35. Slide 29 shows the reduction of over 16,000 crores in our consolidated gross debt and over 10,000 crores in our consolidated net debt from the peak in June 20 levels. This, along with increasing EBITDA, has led to a substantial improvement in the net debt to EBITDA ratio from a peak of 3.83 times in June 20 to 2.36 times at the end of June 21. The improved performance and strong balance sheet has resulted into a rating upgrade of both Novelis and Hindalco by the respective credit rating agencies. Let me now hand over this call back to Satish to summarize and take you through our key focus areas.
So let me conclude today's presentation with our key focus areas. We continue to deliver a strong performance across all our business segments while maintaining safe and stable operations, supported by improved macros and operating efficiencies. Our focus on cost optimization has helped the company to position itself in the first quartile of the global cost curve. With the prime driving force towards stakeholder value enhancement, Hindalco continues to focus on profitable growth through its investment in recycling, debottlenecking, and organic expansion in the stable and predictable downstream businesses in India and Novelis. Hindalco's product mix diversification will help enriching its product portfolio by increasing the share of high-end value-added products in the overall product mix so as to strengthen its position as the world's largest aluminium downstream company. Another critical area where Hindalco has done remarkably well over the last few years is on the ESG front. Hindalco continues to focus on its ESG commitments while creating a sustainable, greener, stronger, and smarter world together, and strives to be the most sustainable aluminium company in the world. Lastly, and most important, Hindalco is focused on strengthening its capital structure with a strong balance sheet by accelerating the pace of deleveraging through robust cash generation in line with its capital allocation framework. Thank you very much for your attention, and we will now open up for questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on your touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Anyone who has a question at this time, please press star 1 on your phone. We have the first question from the line of Anuj Singla from Bank of America. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good evening, everyone. So first question is on net debt. While on a YOY basis, it's a pretty impressive performance, more than 10,000 crores of deleveraging. But I look at on a QQ basis, there seems to be a build-up of around 4,500 crores. If I, just thinking aloud, this could be due to working capital requirements in copper. But if you can just throw some more light on that and give us some more color, that'd be great.
Yeah, you're right. So in the Indian operations, the main reason is the copper requirement working capital. And this is largely driven by the higher LME in copper. You remember that, it's really gone up very high. And this has resulted into extra working capital blockage. But you must remember that copper working capital is funded by a very low cost buyer's credit and dollar-denominated working capital loans. So really speaking, it doesn't really matter much for us. And this is working capital requirements are transitory. They move up and down with the LME movements. So it is not really a cause of major worry for us.
Okay. Understood. So if I were to, exclude this, will it be fair to assume on a debt side, excluding this buyer's credit, we would be down maybe on a QQ basis as well?
So when you look at it in rupee terms, you see Novelis debt is the same as before, but
right.
When you convert this into rupees, there's a little bit of a dollar-rupee exchange impact as well on the rupee side. There's 1,000 crore coming purely arising from that. So that's the other part of it.
Okay. Secondly, one data reconciliation. So you mentioned in the presentation on the first slide that the business EBITDA is 2,513 crores. But when I add up the segmental EBITDA for aluminium and copper, it comes to 2,621 crores. So can you help me? I think probably it includes a part of other income as well, which is a part of these two numbers. Can you help me reconcile these two numbers? And if we were to just focus on the operational EBITDA, which is a number we should refer to?
Yeah. So really speaking, as we mentioned at the beginning of this call, one change that we have made in the definition of segment EBITDA is that corporate overheads that were earlier apportioned between the two businesses in India, they are no longer apportioned there. So it comes as a kind of unallocable expense below the segmental EBITDA line. That minus the treasury income. So for example, in this quarter, we had about 200 crores of the corporate overheads, which is coming below, and 100 crores of treasury income, which is coming in there. So there's a net of 100 crore, which is a negative net unallocable expenses, which has to be reduced from the overall segmental EBITDA.
Understood.
That's the difference between 26 and 25.
Understood. And lastly, given the cost pressures and the inflationary concerns, can you talk about how should we look at the cost of production in aluminium, over the next quarter? And given the aluminum prices are also high, any change in the hedging strategy there? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you remember last quarter's guidance, so Q1 to Q4, the cost was up 4%. And what we are seeing is Q2 to Q1, the cost will be up 5%. And the cost inflation is starting to kick in because coal is sequentially up by 8%. CP coke is the biggest culprit, up 25% now. So we are seeing Q2 at 5% more than Q1 cost of production. So that's the first part. Second part, hedging, as I said, this year we don't intend to do any more. Last time, whatever I had said for this year, which was 32% at an average of 1913, we have not done anything. Next year, we were at 18%. We have now done 5% more in fact, we just did it last few days. We got about 2,560. So we are 23% hedged at 22-29 for next year. So we have more or less reached our insurance level for next year.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Sumangal Nevatia from Kotak Securities. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. First question, on the copper side, now that the maintenance shutdown is behind us, can we now expect on a quarterly run rate volumes at rated capacity in close to 100 KT every quarter? And then on a profitability side, what sort of quarterly EBITDA should we bake in, given that large part is already fixed at annual TCRC?
Yeah, so copper, you see, is driven by many value drivers. And therefore, sometimes some of the things like sulfuric acid prices, what is happening on the DAP side, all these things also sometimes make a difference. But you are right, in a broad sense, you should see a sustained performance now. Looking at what has happened in July, we are expecting Q2 to be a reasonably, operationally a strong quarter. And therefore, on the other hand, of course, the market has been a little soft, as we mentioned in the call earlier. Going forward, again, market is likely to improve. Let's wait and watch how much does it improve. The more the domestic market improves, the more is the profitability for us. Exports are less profitable in copper business. So really speaking, it's driven by many of these factors. But if you want a kind of guidance on the new definition of copper segment, as we have called it out now, you should expect 300 crores or thereabouts to be the normal level of the reported EBITDA now. Maybe a little higher or lower, depending upon how these things work. Some of the accounting noise also comes in copper business reporting. So really speaking, in some cases, you will see derivative accounting playing some role there. But if the LME and the rupee remain stable, then that should not contribute to too much volatility there. But this is the broad guidance.
Understood. And even in the maintenance shutdown, if it's all behind us, right? So 100 KT every quarter volumes in the coming quarter should be stable.
Yes. Yeah. Roughly about 90 KT is the quarterly production that we target. But we also do some kind of, additional sales from.
So the sales is around 100, production is around 90.
Okay. I have a second question from the pie. So we've seen in the last couple of months, a few of our peers announcing some debottlenecking and expansion upstream capacities. So any updated thoughts on that? I just want to understand from medium to long term, and what sort of sustainable LME level would you like to see, and for what period before reviewing our thoughts on capital allocation on upstream?
So I think that, on the debottlenecking side, even we had one line in Renukoot shut down. We have ports in Hirakud that we can bring back on. So we are working on all those. I think from a longer term sustainable strategy, I think you've asked me this question before. We stick to our capital allocation to value added downstream for now. The issue, Sumangal, is not just the LME, it's the source of power and the cost of power as well. Because LME today is at 2600, and I keep reminding people the last expansion was done in 2008 when LME was at the same 2600. So in 3 to 5 years when the projects come in, the LME goes down. So I think we will stick with our strategy of putting most of the capex that we will generate during this high LME periods into our downstream value added.
Okay. And so you mentioned about some bit of debottlenecking. What sort of volumes can we add with these exercises?
About 50 KT more.
Understood. And just one last question. We've seen some credit rating upgrades even on Hindalco side. So any translation of interest cost saving do we expect in the coming quarters?
Our current loans are mostly bank loans, project loans. They are not impacted directly by this credit rating upgrade. And our existing bond, which is actually due for repayment next year, has a fixed coupon on it. How it can help is, in case we decide to raise any money through bonds and refinance, depending upon the cost, etc., then those can be availed at a much cheaper rate. So that is how it can help.
Understood. All right. Thanks and all the best, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Pinakin Parekh from JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my first question is on coal. We have recently seen thermal coal auctions take place for new blocks. From Hindalco's perspective, sir, is it fully covered on thermal coal because we have not seen any aggressive participation by the company in the coal block auction?
No, Pinakin, we participated in Burapar and we were the only bidder. That's why it did not happen. But if you know the process, the government will bring it back. And then if we are still the only one, we'll get the coal block. So so Chakala we got for 5 million and Burapar is also another 4-5 million. So we would love to get majority of our coal, 75 to 80% in-house now, rather than be exposed to e-auctions and linkages, etc.
Understood. So, just going back on the aluminum smelting capacity addition, I know you have answered this before as well in the previous calls, but if tomorrow, over the next few months, if the company has more visibility on captive coal production within its own mines, then will it relook at smelting capacity expansion?
So, all I can tell you is, Pinakin, we will continue to evaluate and I'll tell you that it's not related to coal. It is very unlikely we will put new smelting capacity that's coal-based. We are actually, if you looked at even my remarks, which we are talking about in Aditya, we can get now 130, 150 megawatts of power from pumped hydro. So we would like, if we have to put some additional pots and all in Aditya, we will try to do it with a cleaner source of energy. So that's what we are evaluating, not coal-based. So are we looking at other energy so that we can put more smelting in Aditya and Mahan? Yes. But it's not related to coal-based.
Understood. Thank you very much. So my second question is on copper. Now, copper smelting over the years has been I won't use the word difficult, but it has been, a volatile business in terms of quarter to quarter. At this point of time, in terms of the overall EBITDA contribution to Hindalco, it's less than 5%, but there is a meaningful working capital block, and from quarter to quarter, there is volatility. How do you see the future of the copper smelting business within the overall Hindalco framework? Will it grow? If it won't grow, will it remain within the company, or do you think that at some point of time, divestment is potentially an option?
Pinakin, let me just tell you what our next 3 to 5 year plan for copper is. I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to add further downstream capacity in copper rods, in copper tubes. We are going to add we are looking at about 100 KT of copper cathode production coming from the scrap route to be added. So these are the two things that we are going to do. So I think that as a part of our sustainability strategy, both aluminium and copper fit in quite well. Both are in high demand for the electrification. So this is why we think at least in the next 3 to 5 years, our strategy is to expand copper downstream as well as scrap-based copper production.
So that capex should happen over the next 18 to 24 months, or it's slightly more medium term?
I think that we will probably finalize that the copper rod one you're going to see fairly quickly. Just hold on.
Understood. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving to the next question from the line of Amit Dixit from Edelweiss. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question, and congratulations for a good set of numbers. I have 2 questions. The first one is on the recent board approval on 3,000 crore investment, for a production capacity of 170 KTPA. So, what kind of incremental EBITDA do you expect from this?
So look, I'm not going to give you our RFA details, but it's 170 KT of high-end FRP products that are going to come out of the Hirakud Aditya complex.
So what would be those FRP products? I mean, if you can just detail those products.
Yeah, so mostly we are going to do a combination of hard alloys which go into defense and industrial. It's going to do ACPs that go into BNC. It's going to be certain amount of can body stock. So these are probably the 3 major products that it's going to do. Certain amount of foil stock as well. By the way, one thing I wanted to tell you guys in general is that we are flat out on the FRP side trying to meet the local demand. Really, we cannot meet the local demand right now.
Okay, so I mean, a follow-up on this is if the local demand remains as strong as it is, then can we expect some more capacity expansion at Aditya and Mahan?
So look, what we announced, which I think I've been talking about, good you got the board approval today, is the second phase of Hirakud, which is 170 KT. That will take us 2 to 3 years to execute. Simultaneously, the extrusion expansion in Silvassa is going on. So I think the next 2 to 3 years we are going to focus on implementing these 2. And then of course a phase 3 will come as well. Because the hot mill in Hirakud is about 450 KT. So with this expansion, we would have reached 270. So we still have more place to expand in Hirakud.
Understood, sir. Very helpful. The second question is on coal sourcing mix. If you can let us know for this quarter, how much was linkage, your own coal and imports, if any, and what is the likelihood of this mix in FY22 going ahead?
So this quarter was linkage was 69, e-auction was 22, own mine was 5. I think that going forward, the own mine part will go up a little bit because we are getting now coal from Katotia as well. So that 5 may become 10% in Q2, Q3.
Okay. Thank you very much and all the best.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Next question from the line of Ritesh Shah from Investec. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. A couple of questions. Sir, first on ESG, you did touch upon your initial remarks about renewable projects with storage pumped hydro, and you did indicate a number of 130 megawatt and incremental scope of smelting capacity. Sir, is it possible, can you detail more on the concept of pumped hydro? That's one. And secondly, you also touched upon CCUS pilot project by FY23. So just wanted to understand what is the eventual basically game plot over here and the sort of investments it will attract. That's the first question on ESG.
Yeah, so the first part, I think you should check out companies like Greenko, which I think you probably are following in India. In Andhra, they have a pumped hydro. So basically, they pump the water up and then use it to generate energy. And we have been trying to work with them to see if they can at least replace one full unit of Aditya, which is 130 to 150 megawatts. And if we can get that at a reasonable economics, that is the project that we have been discussing with them. And on the second part on carbon capture and sequestration, the fact that makes coal dirty is the high CO2 emission. So there is a lot of work going on in seeing how you can capture the carbon and sequester it. It's not a new concept. The cost of sequestration can be quite high. There are many Western projects going on. But as those things pick up momentum and the technology evolves, we are trying to work with some companies to see if that we can do a pilot in India as well.
That's useful. So specifically on pumped hydro, any specific numbers on the cost that we are looking at for a hurdle rate for us to shift for one specific unit, 130, 140, what you indicated?
So look, our something around 4 to 4.5 rupees will make it economically viable.
Okay, that's useful. So my second question is, you touched upon the FRP investment of 170 KT that broadly implies around $2,300. What sort of IRR are we looking at over here? And I think earlier in our commentary we have indicated that we were looking at certain sort of trade measures from the government before we embark anything material on the downstream side. So any update over there? And you did indicate the hot mill capacity was 450, and the post-current announcement it will go to 270. So can you help reconcile the bridge? I think 34 KT is extrusion, 170 recent announcement, and finishing assets was 50. So there is some missing leg over there. If you could help reconcile that number, please.
They don't mix extrusion with rolling. Extrusion is completely a different process from billets. So the hot mill is for rolling products. So if you take 450, if you are at 100, 170 added, you are at 270. So you have another 180 KT, 170 KT more to do for another cold mill further down the road. That's the reconciliation on the Hirakud hot mill. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And sir, on the capex intensity, it comes to around $2,300. How should one look at the IRR and ROC over here, specifically with respect to trade measures?
So the IRR of the project with the current product mix we are looking at should be around north of 15%.
Sir, is that number a bit conservative?
You could say, because it depends on the pricing and the product mix, but IRR of 15% on a base case, I think I'm quite happy to launch the project.
Okay. And sir, last follow-up, are we expecting anything from the DGTR on any of the projects where we are putting on capacities? I think you had indicated on foils.
Yeah, there are 3 trade cases going on right now. So the first one is again under Malaysia for wire rod, foil stock from ASEAN, as well as FRP from China. So all 3 are in fairly advanced stages. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. The government is quite serious about these cases.
That's very useful. Thank you so much and good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Indrajit from CLSA. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. Couple of questions from my side. First, on the Utkal Alumina expansion. So I think in the presentation you have mentioned it will be commissioned in this quarter, that is second quarter. So have we tied up buyers for that alumina, or what stage we are in, or are we in advanced stage of like reducing the utilization of our existing refinery?
So as I had mentioned before, some part of it will be internal, some part we are talking to one domestic user of alumina and trying to finalize that.
All right. So when it starts the next quarter, so it will be sold in open market in spot basis? Is that correct understanding?
It is, by the way, this week it is already starting to produce. I think that we will sell it initially to a domestic user of alumina. I don't know if I can be more clearer than that.
No. All right, that's helpful. My second question is actually for Dave. One clarification from the earlier Novelis con call. I think in 3 years' time, we will be at $220 million plus annualized run rate of synergies from Aleris. And I think Dave highlighted that we will achieve that $350 million annualized EBITDA run rate again in 3 years' time. So how should we look at it? That the erstwhile without synergy EBITDA will be just about $130 million, or actual EBITDA could be much higher including the synergies for Aleris?
Dave?
Yes. So here's the thing. So we are talking about the short term. We are talking about the next 2 to 3 years. Energy is where synergy will play a disproportionate part in it. We are not going to that things will stop there. So in 1 to 2 years, synergy are going to play a role. As part of the design, and as part of the way we thought that the opportunities are much better and faster. And then beyond the momentum continues. Just because of recovery of aerospace, for example, where in 2 years, it will be a bit, I would say. So what thing is that short-term synergy will play the role. Long-term, there is going to be more momentum, and it is not going to stop here in 60. I think that we are very comfortable with it going well above 400. Remember all the time that in our acquisition case, these numbers were possible with Louis Port and a far better performing port can be divested. So I think that things are in a very good direction. I don't know whether I'm helping your question.
No, that's helpful. Thanks. I think that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Operator? Did we drop off the call or what? What's going on?
Operator, you're there?
If he should see if I still hear you guys.
You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I don't know if the operator has dropped off. Is it?
Operator?
You're going to drop off.
So can we proceed to the next question?
Yes, we were wondering whether you dropped off, operator.
We proceed to the next question from the line of Raj Nahar from Milli Consultant. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry. We move to the next question.
Mr. Raj Nahar, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead with your question.
I think go to the next one. There's a problem on this line.
Sure, sir. We'll proceed to the next question. We take the next question from the line of Vishal Chandak from DAM Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking my question. My question is with respect to this DEFEL divestment and its supply. So 9 months ago, the consideration short receipt was 100 million euros. And we were pretty confident when we launched an arbitration that we would recover this 100 million euros. But in a span of 9 months, we have actually written down more than half of what we were aspiring to receive for the arbitration. Now, just wanted to understand whether the balance $45 million euro, are we still confident, or we could see some more write-offs going forward? And also, what was the reason for writing of this 51 million euro within 9 months of launching this arbitration? Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, so just to make sure that we understand, we had an agreement to sell the DEFEL plant for 310 million euros. And then there was a dispute over 100 million. We closed the transaction, received the 210 million, and 100 million is what's left to be settled through arbitration. We feel very comfortable with what we perceive would be the outcome in arbitration based on the merits and facts of the case, and we continue to feel very good about that. With that said, that process takes a tremendous amount of time. It distracts management's attention away, comes with a lot of legal expenses to get there. And ultimately, you never know exactly how an arbitrator would rule, even though we feel very good about the facts. And so we did have some discussions with the party to try and settle this, and would be willing to settle this today or in the very near future for $45 million. And we think that would be a good place to settle it in the near term because of all the time and time value of money and legal fees to get there in the end. If we can't settle this, we still feel very comfortable. We'll continue with the arbitration. It will just take a period of time to ultimately get the final ruling somewhere in the 1.5 to 2 year time frame. So nothing from a factual standpoint has changed. It's just more, it was a way to move on and settle at a level that we felt very comfortable with today.
So whatever, what you have mentioned is that since it would take a lot of management's bandwidth and it doesn't sound very convincing, honestly, for a simple reason that if we have a very strong case, why leave that 51 million euro, number one. Number two, if we have a weak case, then eventually what we have said is that the entire transaction of LRS, net of divestment, has been very expensive.
So look, maybe I can. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just
go ahead, Satish.
No, I think that the issue that Steve is trying to outline is that the time value of the money. So if we do the arbitration, which lasts over 2 years, with an entity that is facing, as you know, some pretty clear financial stress, versus if they are trying to do a settlement, sell the DEFEL assets to someone else, and we can. The emphasis on what Steve is saying is in the very near short term, we can get 45 million. Then to our stakeholders, that may be a better option than trying to wait and fight an arbitration with a company that we are not sure how strong they are going to be or survive going forward. So that's the sort of judgment call we are taking. So if we don't get the 45 million in the next very short term, we will proceed with the arbitration. So this is not a sort of, this is a receivable that we will be sort of taking a call on it at the end of every quarter. I don't know if that's making sense.
This makes perfect sense. As you rightly explained, as compared to whatever is receivable from a sinking ship, better get it fast than be it lost forever. I completely agree. Thank you very much for the help.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Gopal from SBI Life. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Sir, realization during this quarter on the aluminum side seems to be a bit better versus the LME movement and the hedging which we have. What would have helped in this, sir?
I'm sorry, you're saying that the realization seems better than what you have calculated, is it? Remember that we have about 80 KT of downstream products as well that gets an additional EBITDA.
So I was just sequentially I was checking. So is there any change in the mix sequentially?
No, actually, see, sequentially, because in this quarter we had to do the sales have been a little bit lower, if you notice at 303.
Yeah.
Because, we had 10 KT stuck at the port. So, and the domestic market was weak, so we exported a little bit more. So really the discounting this quarter has been a little bit higher than the discounting in Q4. So any higher realization has been purely because of LME.
Okay, sure, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Satyadeep Jain from Ambit Capital. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. A couple of questions, one on Hirakud again. The capital intensity of $2,300 seems pretty low. Is it just because of brownfield expansion, or is it? And could you remind me? I couldn't understand. Is there hot mill capacity that is already there, and this investment is only on cold mill, or this is hot mill also? And secondly, side to that.
The cold mill is already there. This is adding casting capacity, remelt, cold mill, and some finishing equipment.
Okay, the hot mill is already there, you say?
Yes, the hot mill that we got from Novelis right at the beginning of the Hirakud project, it's a 450 KT hot mill. So the first phase of the project was about 100 KT of rolled products that we got off the ground. And now with the help of Novelis experts, we are now launching the next 170 KT. And we are going up the value-added product level.
Okay.
And I keep saying there's a third cold mill that will come in after this one is finished.
Okay. And when you look at a return expectation of 15%, that is basically implying EBITDA per ton close to what you see in your Novelis developed markets. Are you pricing in increased pricing for such products in India, or is it just the advantage of having a lower cost base, or a combination of both?
So the cost actually is quite favorable, but I think the real differentiator here is the type of products we are selling. So this 170 KT, nearly 50% of it will be exported. So it is a much higher end product with a higher EBITDA per ton. In fact, for the first time we are going to be selling can body stock as well, which is quite a much higher EBITDA per ton than what we are normally used to in India.
Okay. And second question would be for Dev. I think in the pie for the volume mix for this quarter, it seems the auto body shipments, utilization was close to 95% on the face of it, and 17% volume mix for ABS. Did you see any material decline in auto body sheet shipments in this quarter?
No, we do not see any material decline at all. In fact, we will see an increase in the auto body sheet shipment because the semiconductor shortage is actually not going to be as bad as it was in the quarter that we have just reported. Things will get better. Remember, we are also starting commercial shipments from the new lines that have been commissioned. Customers are actually very eager to qualify the line soon, so we will start having shipments, in time from the new line, and also we'll see ramp up starting to at Guthrie. We don't see any, capacity issues coming in the way. I think they're pretty well set, but it will be better than that is just passed.
No, but in first quarter, did you see a sequential decline in auto body shipments? Because based on
we had a sequential decline, and that was really the semiconductors. That was really the semiconductors issue. The sequential decline, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I thought you were asking about the quarter two versus quarter.
Well, just if you look at 17% of 973 KT, that's almost 165 KT. You're operating at 95% utilization. So it didn't seem like a material decline quarter on quarter in auto body sheet, which we would have expected based on semiconductor shortage.
Yeah, and your good points. Well, yes, I mean there was a decline, healthy volume.
The line there is bad. I think your calculation of 95%, I hope you're taking into account that the China line is producing commercial coil now, the new one.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, that we are starting to have shipments from the new line. So right now, I mean we are already starting to see the impact of the 300 KT capacity expansions. So we are in a good place. I mean, if your point is that we are seeming very capacity constrained on the cash side, no. I mean, overall, yes, we are tight on capacity on the coil side, but not on the finish side.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Bhavin Chheda from Enam Holdings. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Congratulations on all-time high numbers and also recently hitting a 1 lakh crore market cap, creating a lot of shareholder wealth. I think management team has done a phenomenal job both in India and at Novelis. So the few questions on obviously the future growth from here on. You mentioned on upstream capacity expansion by adding pods wherever you are adding renewable capacity. So will this model will be applicable for your other smelters also, and you will keep evaluating this over time? Because I think there's a lot of demand and you are already operating full on the upstream capacity, and there lies an opportunity since India is rich in bauxite. So what will be the roadmap for next 3-4 years for on upstream capacity?
So look, I'm saying again, our majority of the management bandwidth is focused on downstream expansion. I think on the upstream side, Aditya and Mahan, the two new smelters, we have enough land and we have enough water, and so these are the places we will evaluate whether we get like a pumped hydro or something, or some natural gas pipeline coming in, and we will evaluate it at that time. But I still think I want to repeat that majority of our bandwidth is focused on this downstream expansion.
Sure. Second one on the coal price, which recently has seen a sharp increase. So what kind of cost escalation we should model in the coming quarters?
I said next quarter, 5% more than quarter one.
5% more. Right. And the last one on the net debt increase, you mentioned mainly driven by copper working capital requirements. So now since the copper price is adjusted to a high level of $10,000 odd ton, so we do see some unwinding over the next few quarters as your EBITDA run rates remain strong?
No. So in copper, if the LME remains where it is, you will not see a further drain on the working capital. but it will remain at that high level. But as I mentioned, in copper, it is funded by buyer's credit, which is available at a sub 2% kind of a funding. And it is because we are into dollar, it's a dollar-denominated business, so we don't have to really hedge or anything. It's an offset which is available. So really speaking, the cost of that extra working capital is not very high for us.
I mean, it's counted in our debt numbers is what Praveen's point is, but it's not really a debt that way, because we have a very cheap working capital, buyer's credit line.
I understand that. So on a reported net debt basis, I'm saying since the cash flows are very strong, so you're based on reported net debt numbers, if the copper remains at current level, reported net debt would go down by next fiscal end, right?
So again, see, there are 2-3 aspects to it. Operationally, we are generating good cash flow, both in Novelis and India. So typically, this cash flow, if not fully utilized for capex, etc., should reduce our debt, at least net debt, even if it is not gross debt. Now, in quarter one, what has happened is both in Novelis and in copper business in India, the working capital requirement has gone up because of the LME of both copper and aluminum going up. And therefore, the quarter one cash flow has largely been consumed by the working capital requirements at both. In fact, it has added to our net debt. Going forward, if the LME doesn't move up from here, and if we keep generating the kind of cash we are generating, obviously you will see some net debt reduction. And if the LME comes down again for whatever reason, let's say in copper, then that will help in blocking the cash which is already there in the copper.
And what would be the India capex number for 22?
2,700 crores.
27. And what was the MJP premium realized in Q1?
Realized is a difficult one, depends on many things, but MJP is running, I think, currently at 160, 170. So when we export most of our contracts, we get the full MJP. Domestic is a difference because it's a net realization. But export, we are getting the full MJP.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, due to time constraint, that was the last question. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Pai for his closing comments.
Yes, so thank you everyone, and I think that we are in a very favorable environment both in Novelis and in the Indian business, and I think that as long as we can take care of our employees and handle this COVID situation, which has not really gone away, and I think that the people that can manage the situation properly are going to benefit. So the market will be there and the demand will be there. So I think that that is our focus, to make sure that we keep our employees and our plants safe and operating, and then take advantage of a very favorable macro environment that exists. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the management. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Hindalco Industries, that concludes this conference call. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.